Hey everyone, welcome to Fighting Over the Card Catalog, a snarky look back at young adult novels of the 80s and 90s. I'm Jess.
I'm Steven, and I'm here to make my wife happy.
We're taking a journey to find out how many terrible and hopefully some not so terrible books from my youth I can get my husband to read before he reconsiders this whole marriage. So this week we read Anastasia at Your Service by Lois Lowry, published in 1982. Tell us about it.
Anastasia at Your Service. Anastasia's life is just one problem after another. Just as she's learned to love life in the suburbs, her best friend goes off to basketball camp and leaves her high and dry. Not only high and dry, but bored, and worst of all, suffering because of extreme poverty. Luckily, Anastasia comes up with the perfect solution: a job as a lady's companion, just like in the English mystery novels. Unluckily, the job she gets in response to her advertisement is nothing like what she had in mind, and instead of being the perfect solution, it just brings Anastasia more problems. How can she live with the humiliation of meeting Mrs. Bellingham's granddaughter, someone who might have been her friend, at a party where Anastasia is the maid? How will she ever manage to pay for the silver Bockle she accidentally threw into the garbage disposal? And what is a Bockle anyway?
So, on a scale of 1 being the best book ever to A Dementor's Kiss of 10, sucking the soul from your love of reading, what'd you think?
I'd say, comparing it to our other books, I'd have to put it around a 3.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I give it a 2.
Yeah.
I love me some fucking Anastasia. I mean, it was delightful when we were at my infusion last week and you started reading the book and you're like actually laughing a couple times out loud. You rarely laugh out loud to like anything. So that was quite nice. So as we begin, Anastasia is in a full-on depression. She is bored and broke, an awful combination when you're 12. But I aspire to Anastasia's level of drama. She's inspired by great deaths in literature to express her despair, like Beth in Little Women, a few small coughs, and then weakly, farewell, my dear sisters. Or Juliet, a gulp of poison, a horrible face because poison probably tasted terrible, and then, sadly, sorry things didn't work out, Romeo. Or Charlotte in Charlotte's Web. No final words because spiders couldn't talk, but a few writhes. Probably spiders would writhe, dying. Then all 8 legs. Or 6? Anastasia couldn't remember. Straight up in the air. Tough to act that one out when you only had 2 legs. I just love her very much.
I like her interaction she has with her parents.
They're the best. Awesome Mom comes in and tells her just saying groan out loud is no good. But she's happy to listen. Awesome Dad always has his notebook with him because you might have to take notes on the human scene. Explaining, well, I eavesdrop and observe people. Then I make notes about what I see and what I overhear. After a while, I use some of that stuff in poems. Which is basically exactly what Harriet from Harriet the Spy was doing, just a little shadier because she was 11.
Right.
And then that made me think, man, could you imagine Harriet and Anastasia being friends? I mean, wow, that's my OTP now. So Awesome Dad thinks that she could fix all this by getting a job. She's open to the idea, but she knows that it's a difficult thing to do at her age, other than babysitting, which she definitely does not want to do. And Awesome Dad asks her what she would like. So what she would really like is to be a companion to a rich old lady. So Awesome parents tell her to write up a resume, and they'll put it around town at places rich ladies frequent. They're so supportive. So she writes up this ad. Available. No, I'm sorry. Let's not skip this. Sam was hearing this and heard Anastasia at your service, and he calls it Anastasia at your service. So that's what she puts at the top of her ad. Anastasia at your service. Available. Companion to elderly, wealthy women. Like in mystery novels by Mary Roberts Reinhardt. You can find these at the public library if you've never read one. The companion is a young woman of good breeding, but her family has fallen on hard times, so she needs to earn her living. Her duties are that she's always patient and kind to her employer, even if the employer is sometimes grouchy. She pours tea a lot, she reads aloud to her employer, like gothic novels and stuff, and after each chapter they can discuss romance and give each other advice about love if either one of them has an admirer. The companion advises her employer about what jewelry to wear, like if 3 diamond necklaces at one time are tacky. The companion would tell her so, in a kind and tactful way, of course. The companion pulls down the shades when the employer wants to take a nap in the afternoon, and then she wakes her up if necessary, like if the vicar comes to call or something. And if the employer is in a wheelchair, the companion pushes it. I think I require a 12-year-old companion.
Nice.
So she ends up getting a call for a job from Mrs. Bellingham. But when she gets there, she's put to work in the kitchen, polishing silverware. And she accidentally sends a spoon down the garbage disposal. So this is because the other maids were peeling carrots and potatoes, and they just had the disposal on that whole time.
Right. And I guess she doesn't understand the sound of a garbage disposal.
That was confusing. But what are you doing? Who does that?
Mm-hmm.
Just leave it on the whole time. And I also learned today that you should not put potatoes down the garbage disposal.
Why is that?
Because the starchiness clogs them up. Because it expands. It's bad. So Mrs. Bellingham calls it a debacle. And Anastasia's all, what the hell is a bockle? Bockle. The bockle ends up costing $35, though, so Anastasia owes her 12 more hours of work to pay it off.
Yeah, I have an issue with this.
Okay.
So, like, she says it's worth $35 from this store.
Mm-hmm.
It's a silver spoon, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So...
one of many.
When you go to buy something at the store, you actually get it, right?
Uh-huh.
So she has to pay $35 for the spoon, but she doesn't actually give her the spoon.
Do you think Anastasia wants the mangled old spoon?
It's made of silver.
It's true. She did not offer that. She should have offered. You're right.
It's not that the silver got destroyed. It got disformed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's still a silver thing worth the weight of silver.
You're correct. She could have at least melted it down and taken that off the $35.
Yeah, taken it to a pawn shop, have them weigh it, make sure it was real silver, and gotten part of the money back.
You're right.
Yeah.
Good call.
So really, she actually took more than the $35 because she kept the spoon herself. Anyway.
You're right.
Yeah, have an issue with that.
Okay. Fuck Miss Bellingham. So she gets started on working off her hours, her falsified hours, the next day, helping serve at a lunch for Mrs. Bellingham's granddaughter's birthday.
Yeah, so she also tells her she's making, what, like $2.50 an hour or something like that?
Yeah.
And Anastasia's upset because that's what babysitters pay.
Uh-huh. Although the BSC girls, a couple years later, make a whole $1 less. Anyway. Although this is outside of Boston, and that is in rural Connecticut, so maybe pricing would be different.
Right.
Anyway, the granddaughter's name is Daphne, and she's going to be going into the 7th grade, just like Anastasia. Anastasia embarrassingly burst into tears that night at dinner. After explaining to Austin parents, they agreed that she had been tricked and used, which would justify quitting, but she did ruin the Bockle, so she should work it off. They did not have the insight that you did. Congratulations. You're more insightful than a Harvard professor. They would just give her the money if they had it. $35 then is about $80 today. But they just don't have that lying around. So, but they do tell her, they do tell her times that they've been humiliated at work. Awesome Mom was hired to illustrate a book on Houston Rockets. So she did all sorts of research and had a whole presentation ready about the insides of rockets and everything. But then they all laughed, saying that they meant the basketball team. But she did get a job doing rockets.
Yeah, they gave somebody else the book illustrating the Houston Rockets, but gave her a book about rockets.
An awesome dad gave an entire lecture with his zipper down in front of like 87 students. Anastasia is mortified at the thought of serving someone she may end up knowing in school. So she decides to disguise herself as a middle-aged woman, which includes wearing makeup, putting powder in her hair, and wearing one of Awesome Mom's bras stuffed with pantyhose. She had tried the Kleenex trick, but it looked shitty, which I've never understood that. I mean, that people use Kleenex. It does look shitty.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, this all starts falling into the deviled eggs, the fake boobs, as Anastasia is serving them. But Daphne is the only one to notice, and she gets her out of there before anybody else does. And while they're getting Anastasia cleaned up, girls become friendly, and Anastasia learns that Daphne's father is a minister. He never swears or smokes, and her parents don't fight, and they forgive her for everything, which is so fucking boring. They end up deciding to take revenge out on Mrs. Bellingham. Anastasia wants to for making her work as a maid, and Daphne does so because she dared to give her a doll for her birthday.
In front of everybody.
In front of everybody. She's 13. And also just because Daphne's kind of a pain in the ass. So Anastasia goes over to Daphne's house the next night to come up with their revenge plan. And y'all, Daphne is a fucking mess. This girl mowed a fucking swastika into their front yard to see if her dad would forgive her. And he does. But she does have to mow it out the next day.
Yeah, she sounds like one of those kids. If you can't get good attention, then you'll get bad attention.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly what she's doing.
And she says it's because her parents forgive everything, but her parents are probably really concentrating on their congregation and other people and other people's issues, and
because they're like never there.
Yeah,
she's like,
not so much on their daughter. And so, she's acting out.
Yeah, although she does say she's spoiled rotten, but I mean that happens, right?
Yeah,
because parents overcompensate.
Yeah. They try to give them things instead of
love.
time.
So okay, I gotta read the full description of Daphne's room. Daphne's room was different. The walls were painted black, and there was a huge, obscene poster of 2 dogs stacked up between the windows. There were clothes all over the floor. Anastasia recognized the yellow and white dress that Daphne had worn to her grandmother's luncheon, lying in a pile with sweaters and jeans and underwear. On the unmade bed was a brand new, expensive doll with its clothes removed, staring with blue glass eyes at the ceiling. A kitchen paring knife had been plunged into its chest. What the fuck is this child? So, Mrs. Bellingham is having a big fancy party that people are going to pay like $100 to come to, for charity. And that Anastasia is going to have to work at. So, Daphne is going to steal some extra invitations, blank ones, and hand them out to various undesirable types. Like the drunk homeless man, deinstitutionalized psychotics, and a couple of stoners. Grossest of all, people that live in low-income housing. Daphne, said Anastasia slowly, we're really not being fair. All those people have problems, but it isn't fair to call them undesirable. I don't call them undesirable. I like them. I think that they're the most interesting people in town. I even like that grubby old drunk, but my grandmother will think they're undesirable. And she's the one we want to humiliate, right? So that's pretty yikesy. But, Anastasia gives some pushback, and then it gets even better later.
Mm-hmm.
So. But when Anastasia returns home, she finds herself in the middle of an emergency. Her 2-year-old awesome brother, Sam, has fallen out of his second-story window, and his head hit a fucking tree stump. Like, they're really lucky he's not dead.
Yeah, at this point, she doesn't know that he's going to actually live.
No. He does have a depressed skull fracture, but he's so young that he should heal quickly. So when my brother was about the same age, 2.5, okay, this is a big point of contention with us. So we had a retaining wall of cinder blocks between our yard and like our neighbors. There's like much higher up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going over to play with Barbies one day, and I crawled up over the thing, and he was trying to follow me because he was 2 and annoying. And he pulled a cinder block down on his foot. Yeah, but it did not break because of something exactly like that. Because his bones weren't formed enough to actually break. But anyways, he tells everybody I pushed the cinder block on him, and I did not. I'm saying this officially now. Anyway. He was 2. He doesn't remember. Little fuck. So Anastasia's understandably very upset and doesn't believe it when people say he's not going to die. And because
his parents, when they say it, they have this very worried look in their eye.
I really love how Lowry expresses how that, like, when you're upset about one thing, like, thinking about anything else, just even the tiniest bit related makes everything seem worse. She says she cried because they had called her at Daphne Bellingham's, and Daphne hadn't answered the phone. She cried because she had called him old dumb Sam, and it wasn't true. He was smart, and he was young, and he was the only brother she had, and she loved him more than anything, and now she was sure they were all lying and he was going to die. Once, more than once, often, she had hidden his blankie just to make him mad, just to tease him. She cried because she kept remembering that. And the nurse comes in and tells her that he's not going to die, but nurses lie a lot, like saying shots aren't going to hurt, and they sure as hell do. But once the doctor comes in, he says Sam's going to be fine, and his parents start smiling. Their parents start smiling, and he starts smiling, and so then that's when Anastasia's convinced. She's even more upset the next day because before going to visit, Awesome Mom tells her that visitors under the age of 14 are not allowed.
This was a very good interaction.
I loved it.
With her parents.
Yeah. They're awesome parents. They're awesome. Awesome Mom gets all pissed off too. She's like, it would be detrimental to Sam's entire recovery if you couldn't visit him. This is the stupidest rule. And Awesome Dad says, a rule like that is so dumb, it deserved to be broken. And he decides that since she's tall, she's like 5'7", they'll just say she's 14, and Anastasia is aghast at him even thinking about lying. But he decides to change his whole philosophy of life, which is to always be honest. My new philosophy of life, he announced, allows for the occasional posing of a 5'7" 12-year-old girl as a 14-year-old girl for the emergency purpose of cheering up her little brother in the face of idiotic bureaucratic rule. They're just the best. Okay, so we've run into this a few times. The whole rule of anyone 14 or younger or 12 or younger. So I looked it up. There are a few different reasons. One place I said is that basically children are annoying and their parents can't always, look after them the best while they're dealing with the patient or whatever. And also that, kids could get upset, real little ones, seeing everything in the hospital and like their family member or whatever being sick. And also they could bring germs in, as their tiny little cesspool of germs. But they could also pick up germs, and with their lowered immunity, that would be pretty bad. But it does appear that now most places, as long as kids aren't actively sick, it's fine. And even if they do have a rule, it would like pretty much be up to the nurse's discretion. So that's because like in modern books and things, I never run into that anymore. But
yeah, there were a couple of places when I was younger that had that rule. Memorial Hospital in Palestine was one, which is no longer there.
Right.
And then it seemed like there was some place in Tyler that had that rule at one time, but yeah.
But when you were young was about the time this book came.
Yeah.
The year I was born, by the way. Anyway, Anastasia vows to be a super devoted and caring sister to Sam throughout this whole ordeal. Until she hears him singing a song about drunk monkeys before they even get to his room. And then she goes back to thinking he's impossible. He's going to have to stay in the hospital a while, though, and he starts talking about a lady named Mrs. Flypaper who visits him. But nobody at the hospital knows anyone even close to having that name. And also, they had to shave all of his curls off. And this appears to be the real tragedy of it all.
Yeah, it made her mom cry.
And he looks like Kojak, which we had to look up.
I remember Kojak because they still showed reruns of Kojak when I was really, really little.
Did you remember him being bald?
Yes, I remember him being bald. I couldn't remember his name right offhand, but as soon as I saw a picture, it popped into my head. It was Telly Savalas.
Telly Savalas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea. I thought I knew, but until you showed me the picture, and I was like, oh, I had no idea. Anastasia goes into work to prep for the party, and she's assigned to dusting the books in the library, and it's a big old awesome sounding library. All four walls covered in like leather-bound books that were like probably classics, probably some first editions. And she laments about how awesome Dad would just fucking love to read these books and to have them. And Mrs. Bellingham probably hasn't read them at all. She assumes because the pages are all like stuck together and stuff. Probably the book her father would kill for was right here in Mrs. Bellingham's study. She knew he was exaggerating, though. Her father would never kill anything. Maybe a cockroach, nothing else. And then we have some discourse on Henry James that is charming as fuck. Now, she could see that Henry James, whoever he was, had written more books than the author of Nancy Drew. Now, that was an accomplishment. Poor Henry James. He had to spend all his time writing in order to write so many books. He probably never went out for pizza or anything. He couldn't possibly have had any social life. There wouldn't be time. She wondered if Henry James had ever been to a movie or a disco. Probably he was old by now and had never had any fun in his whole life. He must have been sitting at a typewriter for 50 years. Probably he was Mrs. Bellingham's age. Probably he would enjoy meeting Mrs. Bellingham since she had bought all of his books. He wouldn't have to know if she'd never read them. I could get my father, thought Anastasia, to tell Mrs. Bellingham the plots of the books. Then she could pretend she'd read them. A lot of kids at school did book reports just by reading the inside flaps of the covers and maybe the chapter headings. My father could fill old Bellingham in on the plots. Then we could invite Henry James to dinner, and Mrs. Bellingham And it might be the start of a big romance. She could say stuff like, Henry, I love that last book of yours. Anastasia glanced at the title, The Turn of the Screw. Then old Henry would twirl his mustache if he had one and say, Thank you, Willa. May I take you to the movies on Friday? But then Anastasia made a face. It would never work. With a title like The Turn of the Screw, old Henry's novel was going to be about hardware. Hardware or sex. She was quite certain Mrs. Bellingham wasn't interested in either subject. Oh, Anastasia, I love you so much. Hey, kids! Do you love fighting over the card catalog?
Totally!
Now you can find your favorite podcast all over the World Wide Web. Look for us on Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube, and Pinterest at Fighting Over the Card Catalog, or on Twitter at Card Catalog Pod. And as a special bonus, head over to our very own website, fightingoverthecardcatalog.com. And now, you can get the inside scoop on co-host Jess on Instagram and Twitter at Jess Digress.
Whoa!
Next, you can become a junior cataloger just by sharing us with your friends and rating and subscribing on Apple Podcasts.
Whoa!
Available wherever podcasts are sold. Podcasts not actually sold, but available in all podcatchers for free. Junior catalogers under the age of 18, ask your parent or guardian's permission before downloading. So Daphne comes in to steal those blank invitations, and Anastasia tells her about Sam, and Daphne says she wishes she had a little brother. That was weird, Anastasia thought, when Daphne said that she'd like a little brother. Daphne hates her whole family. Why would she want one more person to hate? She doesn't, Anastasia thought seriously. Daphne wants someone to love. Aww. Anastasia goes over to her house, and Daphne does like this kick-ass, hilarious impression of her grandmother, saying how she says that the low-income housing is the habitation of the great unwashed. Anastasia's so impressed that she insists Daphne try out for drama club when school starts, but Daphne gets all irritated and tells her she can't. She's always in detention, which doesn't leave time for extracurricular activities. The next morning is so boring at breakfast without Sam, so Anastasia tries to be funny and do her own impersonation of Mrs. Bellingham, saying, the habitation of the great unwashed. But the awesome parents lose their shit. That, interrupted her father angrily, is the stupidest, most uneducated, mindless, bigoted remark I have ever heard you say. They don't give her the chance to explain. And Awesome Dad is particularly offended because he grew up in actual poverty. He even takes her to his old neighborhood where he grew up, which has turned into an amazing Italian enclave, apparently.
He said that he lived in a 4-room, so it's not 4 bedroom, it's 4 total rooms. Yeah. With his parents and how many brothers?
4.
4 brothers, and they didn't even have a bathroom. Mm-hmm. They had a bathroom in the hallway that they shared with 3 other families.
And they didn't have hot water? It was real. So, yeah, that's why he was like, no, fuck this. So Anastasia expected to be bored because she's, like, heard all these stories about her dad being poor and everything. But, of course, it actually turns out to be really interesting, learning about how her grandparents immigrated from Czechoslovakia. This was 1982, please remember, so Soviet Union was still a thing. Czechoslovakia was still a thing. And they just really had a wonderful immigrant story. That was lovely. So they have lunch there, and she complains about Mrs. Bellingham some more. And Awesome Dad has changed his mind about her after reading an article about her upcoming party, because the proceeds from which will be going to Sam's hospital. So Anastasia throws up 4 times that day. She tells Daphne about it, and they agree that this is not the place to take out their revenge, but it's too late to get the invitations back. They consider calling in a bomb threat, but realize that that may not be the best idea, and it's probably highly illegal. So they decide to just keep an eye out for the invitees and firmly ask them to leave should they show up. Anastasia thinks she spots one because his outfit is, well, he's a tall, slender man in a denim jumpsuit with sequins decorating the pockets. That must be the drunk guy, right? And she's about to ask him to leave, but it turns out he is the most famous decorator in all of Boston. And she spots another man drinking, and he looks familiar. So she approaches him thinking that he's the town drunk, but he's actually Sam's surgeon, and that's where she knows him from. Unfortunately, Daphne does end up asking someone to leave in front of a whole bunch of people. And he's like, "Do you know who I am?" And she goes, "Yeah, a deinstitutionalized psychotic." But he turns out to be the mayor. And so he gets pretty upset about that. Fair enough. And complains to Mrs. Bellingham. So the jig is up. Mrs. Bellingham is very upset, but she does try to be understanding, and she's even a little amused, but she won't really let them see it. She tells the girls that they can leave, but that Anastasia should come by the next day for her pay. And Anastasia does, to her credit, try to refuse it, but Mrs. Bellingham insists. So when she does go by the next day, she brings Sam along. And it turns out Sam and Mrs. Bellingham know each other. She's his Mrs. Flypaper because she volunteers at the pediatric wing of the hospital and had made him a paper airplane. So that's pretty much it. I fucking love this book. So do you have a favorite bit?
Yes. The bit that we just talked about. One of the exchanges with the parents.
About the rules at the hospital.
Yes, about the hospital rules and the bureaucracy. Yeah,
the idiotic bureaucracy.
Yeah,
yeah. Mine is the full-on wokeness for 1982. I mean, Awesome Parents fan, full out calling her out and shutting her down on that. Was amazing. They just become more awesome. And it's like, I don't know that a lot of parents today would full on shut that down like they did. But 1982, great job. I love them. Least favorite bit?
The least favorite bit was all of the shade that was thrown on maids.
Oh, good point.
Because Anastasia, made it sound like being a maid was the worst job in the world. Mm-hmm. And she was meant to be a companion, but you made her be a maid. Mm-hmm. Of all things, why did I have to be a maid?
Yeah, like I could understand, just the confusion there. But
a boy
it was more than that.
A boy at the last party asked her to dance, and she said, "I can't." And he said, "Oh, why? You don't know how to do it? You just move." And she said, "No, I'm the maid," and ran off.
This is a hot college dude, too. Yeah, you're right. And she was working with 3 other maids.
Yeah.
Who all seemed perfectly nice. They didn't call her out about having a bigger bosom. Yeah. So my thing was that, so Mrs. Bellingham turns out to be pretty cool, right, in the end, but we don't ever get any resolution, or learn anything about her true feelings, if they are different, about her feelings about the undesirables and the, great unwashed and all that.
Yeah,
so
I was hoping there was going to be something at the last party where like, like I was hoping that these people were going to show up and something was going to happen to
Yeah,
where
right. She'd be like,
she
"Oh, I
had
know
to
you, homie."
confront her biases
Oh
and
yeah,
yeah. Anyway, that
yeah,
didn't happen.
yeah, yeah. There was no resolution of that, and so it's like, yeah. So what did we learn today?
That Lois Lowry is a better writer than Anne.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with that. Today, I think we are reminded about the importance of kitchen safety. Pay attention to what not only you, but also others are doing in this dangerous area of the home. Particularly, be aware of the electrical machine that grinds up food scraps, as this may lead to a 12-year-old almost calling a bomb threat and ruining her entire life. Thank you. So, no Snark Zone? Man, I don't have a whole lot. Just please go vote. And learn about your down ballot races. They are just as important. And I just learned that we have 26 total races to vote on this weekend.
Yeah. Speaking of racist, I have to to point out all of the coverage that Michael Bloomberg is getting.
Fuck that guy so hard.
Man. Okay, so yeah, he's got a lot of good ads out right now because he is a billionaire who has bought his way into this election.
He's the only one we've seen aside from Trump.
So this is a guy who he himself made policies like stop and frisk, where police officers were encouraged to stop minority people and see if they had anything illegal on them so that they could arrest them. It was a tool for harassment, and it was a tool to try to incarcerate more minority people.
And there are very particular quotes. There is video of him saying these awful things.
Yes. Yeah, basically saying that most of the crime happens in minority communities, so that's where we're putting the police. So of course there's going to be more arrests in the minority community. Well, yeah, because you're putting all the police there.
And giving them carte blanche to harass
at any point. Yeah, with no cause or reason. Another thing he did was he asked for Muslim surveillance of the Muslim community, without any, obviously, because of the 9/11 stuff, there was a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment in New York, but at the same time,
for non-American listeners, Bloomberg was the mayor of New York City. That's why that's important.
Oh yeah. So he was the mayor after Rudy Giuliani, and who was the mayor at 9/11. But yeah, so even though there was nothing saying that any American Muslims were trying to plot anything else, he wanted to put them under surveillance without having cause. So anyway, that's just a couple of the things that are very public and about him and very bad.
Can I tell you the one that came out this week?
Sure.
It's not a racist thing, but it's terrible. So in 2011, he was doing this interview talking about how healthcare is going to bankrupt us. We've got to sit here and say which things we're going to do and which things we're not. Nobody wants to do that, If you show up with prostate cancer, you're 95 years old, we should say, go and enjoy. Have a nice, inaudible, live a long life. There's no cure. We can't do anything. If you're a young person, we should do something about it. Wow.
If you're old, don't use resources. If you're useless, don't use resources.
Exactly. That's the thing. He probably thinks the same thing about disabled people. Exactly. And it's like, wow. How is this man running as a Democrat? I don't.
He's okay. So even though he has not done as well in the polls, he is getting so much more coverage on TV right now, because he is a businessman, and all TV stations and all newspapers are owned by corporations. Whether the station is liberal leaning or conservative leaning, they are still owned by a corporation.
Right.
And so those news sources well, first of all, even the conservative news sources would rather have Bloomberg in office than a Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. So they will give him so much more free press and airtime just in case. Just in case we don't get the guy we really want, we'll get the second guy we want.
Right.
Our number 2 choice will get in.
Even if he's
so they're trying to make Democrat. It where their number 1 and number 2 are going against each other, and it, only a little bit will matter which one wins in the end.
God, could you imagine how insufferable the debates between Trump and Bloomberg would be? Oh my God. Yeah. So please vote in the primaries, Americans. Please. There's a Democratic debate in 12 minutes that I wouldn't have watched. Except this is the first time Bloomberg is actually going to be on the stage. And I really want to see if Liz and Bernie just take him down because they are pissed. Liz has been throwing shade on Twitter this week. Oh my God, it's been amazing.
The corporations do not want Elizabeth Warren.
Absolutely not. At
all, because they are just writing her off and telling everybody she has no chance, even though in national polls, when she is put into the discussion, she still is shown to beat Trump in the general election. But they're writing her off because they do not want her to be president.
And like I said to you last night, I really try not to put any stock in conspiracy theories. I've been trying to ignore that. Oh, they're just, washing her out. There's another word for it. But anyway. But yeah, this week when she's not even part of poll questions and they put up Klobuchar's picture right beside
now
her name.
Is the number 3.
Number 3 in delegates.
Delegates. And she is not even put into the questions for polls.
Yeah. And so the best thing, that thing with her picture was on MSNBC last night, and that's who's hosting the debate tonight. So I'm just kind of here for the drama tonight. I'm ready to get pissed off. I'm ready to tweet so much. Yeah. So what are you reading?
It's The Once and Future is a new take on King Arthur. That title's based on The Once and Future King.
Right.
Which was a very good book as well.
I haven't read any this past week other than Anastasia. So,
yeah.
So good discussion.
I've read a lot about opening bank accounts as a corporation.
You have?
I've read a lot about taxation as a sole proprietor LLC. I've read a lot, but not books.
Oh, I read a lot of the D&D rule book and Dungeon Master Guide because we've started it's the very first time I've played Dungeons and Dragons. We're doing that monthly now, I guess, with our friends, and I'm the Dungeon Master, and it's very scary and stressful. But it's fun. Anyway. So next week, we're going to start another new series. Girl Talk with number 1. Welcome to junior high. So thank you so much for listening. We're rereading the books of your childhood.
So you don't have to.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.